We are picking up in Genesis chapter 41, and we will go back to where we left off last time from verse, what verse is that? We'll just pick up from verse 54 of Genesis chapter 41. We bow our heads and pray. Gracious Father, we thank you for allowing us to be here as we congregate another time. We pray for your presence, pray for your mercies, forgive us of our sins, cleanse us from all unrighteousness, bless us with wisdom, knowledge, and understanding as we open up your holy word today. We ask these favors in the name of your Son, Yeshua. So in chapter 41 of Genesis and verse 54, and the 7th year of famine began to come in. And according as Joseph has said, and the famine was in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. So the famine began to come in. It came in slowly, and it said that even as the famine came in, there was still bread. Bread was still, they still have food in the land of Egypt. And I want to believe that the famine came in because maybe the 4th year after the 7 years of plenty was finished, I want to believe that maybe the rainfall in Egypt was not as plentiful as previous years. So I guess the Nile River didn't overflow its bank as in the past, because during the time of plenty, when all of the crops were growing, I'm assuming that the Nile River, it was overflowing its bank, and all of the crops were able to be fertilized from all of the rich soil that comes from the Nile River. So it seems as though slowly we start seeing less rainfall in Egypt, and because of that they produce less food. So in verse 55 it said, and when all the land of Egypt was famished, meaning that they were starving, they were hungry, not really starving, they wasn't starving yet. They were hungry. That's what the word means. To be famished means that you're hungry, you want food. You're not really starving, but you're hungry. The people cried to Pharaoh for bread, and Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, go to Joseph, what he said to you, do it. I think we touched on that last week. Pharaoh sent all of the people, he directed them to Joseph so that Joseph could tell them what to do, because he put Joseph in charge of gathering up the food. So he just put that responsibility on Joseph. In 56, and the famine was over all the face of the earth. And Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, and the famine became severe in the land of Egypt. So here we see that 56 is telling us that the famine was over all the earth. So is it saying here that the whole world was covered with this famine? Is it saying here, just like when we have the flood, remember when we was dealing in the earlier parts of Genesis, and it talked about the flood, and it said that the flood waters was over the whole world, or over the whole earth. Is this a similar thing that we can assume here? Can we say that this famine was a worldwide famine? I don't know. I don't know if that's what the writer is implying here, to say it was a worldwide famine. Maybe it was, a famine for all the surrounding areas. And to say it was I don't know if we can really say for sure if it was a worldwide famine. Because when you look on the map, you'll see there's a lot of these different countries that, are very close to Egypt. For instance, you see it have Libya, you have Arabia, you have Algeria, you have Niger, Mali, Chad, Sudan, Ethiopia. All of those places are African countries, and they are close to Egypt. They are connected. So maybe a lot of these areas, a lot of these African countries, I want to believe was affected by the famine. Then if you go more north and you go to places like Turkey, because Turkey is, you're going into Europe, and that's also close by. So maybe areas like Turkey, probably was affected. And even though you go to places like Iran and Iraq, you go to Babylon and all of those places, I believe probably was affected. And maybe he probably could have reached as far as places like India. Some of those places depend. If we want to extend it and say, well, it was spread, we can extend it to some of those places.
Okay.
But
one question.
Yes, sir.
I would like to ask
you. Yes. Okay. Being that there was not communication for all over the world, how did they know? How did the writer know that it was all over the world?
Well, that's a good question. You see, I think some of these things, the writer or whoever, Moses, is collecting information after the fact, after these things happen. So, who knows how many years after these things were written down? Because these things wasn't written down at the same time. Like how things happen today. For instance, you have flooding, somewhere down in the Caribbean, and you know about it right away. And something happening in the States, there's some kind of bushfire going on in the States. You can see it on television, you can see it on the news and all of that. It wasn't like that. But I believe some of these things that we are reading here today, they wasn't recorded same time. Who knows how long after some of these things was recorded. Maybe it could be a long period of time, because you have to take into consideration that people lived for a longer period of time back there too. So even though it wasn't recorded same time, but after a period of time, some of these things was put into writing. I guess that's the best answer I could give, Elder Lewis. Amen. Okay.
Also, you can think about it. It could be geographically in an area where established country are situated. Could be known as the then known world, or the world that is included. So they can say, well, it was all over the world.
Well, it could be the populated world.
Right.
And I don't know how many people or how many places was populated at that time. I can't really say. And, I believe that this go really far back. Like how the interpreters then will tell us that this happened about 4,000 years ago. I want to believe that it is more than 4,000 years ago that this really happened, because they are making their calculation based on what was given to them by Bishop James Ussher. Because Bishop James Ussher, he said that the Most High God created the world 4004 BC, and he said it was the 23rd of October, and it was 9 o'clock in the morning. So they are basing their calculation on what this guy Bishop Ussher said. But as we said before, there is nowhere in the Bible where the Bible tells us when the Most High God created the universe. And they are putting their assumption, and they are doing all of these calculations based on what this guy Bishop Ussher said. But I want to believe that what we are reading here happened thousands of years ago. I don't know how much, but I think it is a lot more than what they're saying. It had to be more than 4,000 years. So the point I'm trying to say, as it says in verse 55, it talks about 56, and the famine was over all the face of the earth. Who knows, maybe it could be the areas that was occupied by people. Right. Maybe the time span go back so far that it probably, the whole known universe as we know the universe today, or the earth today, it probably wasn't as populated back in that time. So, because we have to understand that creation, humanity really start in this area that we are dealing with here. That's where humanity really started. So that's where population was really spread out. Because when you look and you check in the scripture, you see even when you talk about the Garden of Eden. The Garden of Eden was in that vicinity too. They don't know exactly where it was, But it talks about the river that flows from the garden, and it was, I think it was either it was going in or coming out from Ethiopia. So it is in that kind of area that all of these places was.
Yeah. But
Okay.
there is another thing here. I've been doing on the study on this. There's a very interesting topic what we are concerning when you say
The whole earth. Because what the Egyptians knew, the Egyptians was a very skillful people. They had made living ships. And long before the Europeans come and started explore, they used to come to North America.
Yeah.
Right,
And they used to trade corn with them too.
right.
So you talk about the Mayas and Omanik people. It was there long. So
Yes.
what they discovered, what are the 5 oceans? There was a current. And once you get that current, you could take it any part of the world.
Right. Well, the Phoenicians, they were seafaring people. And these people, they were traveling. These people were traveling all over. And the Phoenicians, when we talk about the Phoenicians, they were black people. They were African people. And today, Phoenicians are not Africans. Phoenicians suddenly changed. But Phoenician in Bible time, they were African people. We hear about Sidon and all of those places. They were people those are places that the black race of people used to live, and they used to occupy. So as I was saying, I don't know exactly how far this really is, and I'm not going to really doubt what the scripture is saying. I know some people the skeptics are going to use this to really doubt the word of God. It's just like when the Genesis tells us that the flood water covered the whole earth. There are people who don't believe that. They're saying it was just a community or a village or just, in a certain area that was flooded. But, I don't know exactly how far this famine was. But as I said, if you look on a map in the area, you will see that there's a lot of different places that is connected to Egypt. And maybe all of those African countries, maybe some of these places are like going, into like Turkey and Iran and Iraq and all these places probably was affected. Because you could see that, you could travel. It might take you 2 weeks, 3 weeks before you can really get to Egypt from some of these places. But if you really have a need, you need food, doesn't matter where the food is, you will travel to get it. Okay, so it says, and the famine was over all the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptian, and the famine became severe in the land of Egypt. So Joseph opened up all of the storehouses. He built huge storehouses to store these foods. So when the 7 years of plenty was finished, 7 years of famine started, food started to become scarce in Egypt. He opened up the storehouses, and he started selling the food. The food, Joseph was selling the food. The food belongs to the people. Remember, I'm going to get into it. Joseph selling the food, and he's right. He took the food. The food is the food that he took from the people. This, when Joseph had the dream and he gave the interpretation, and he gave instruction to Pharaoh to let the people store 20%. 20% of their food was supposed to be stored so that they can have food for the 7 years of famine that was on its way. And here we see that the same food that he took from these people, he's selling it back to them. And I guess you want to ask the question, why? Why was he doing that?
This is the question I'm asking. Why is it that the same food that is taken from the people is now sold back to them?
Right. Well, the thing is, the way I see it, he did right. Because if he gave them that food for free, what do you think was going to happen? They were not going to take care of that food. They're going to waste it. They're not going to be careful the way how they use that food. But even though it belongs to them, if you know that every time you want food, you have to go and buy that food. When you buy it, you bring it home, you're going to make sure that you use it, and you use it in a sensible way. You don't just waste it and you throw it away in the garbage and stuff like that. You're not going to do that, because you know that you have to pay for it every time you go for it. It's like, if you take your PIN number Let's suppose you take your bank account PIN number and you give it to your children. What do you think going to happen? How much money do you think you're going to have there? After a while, take a picture where you can try it, You can try it if you want to see. Try it. At least, some children, they will be responsible. But most kids today, you take your PIN number and you give it to them. They know, it's free money. Well, you work for it, but to them, it's free money. They're going to use it. And it's the same thing. Joseph is acting responsible. And he knew that if he just allow these people, open up the storehouse and say, well, when you need food, come and take food. These people are going to go in any time and take whatever they want because they know it's there. But if they know every time they go, they have to pay, you have to take out money from your pocket and buy the food. When you get the food, you're going to take it, you're going to take care of it.
Well, Pastor,
yes.
Let's make a comment.
Okay, somebody put battery over there, batteries over there. So,
the point I was making is,
yes.
nobody was saying that capitalism is a new thing. But it seems that capitalism is very old.
Yeah.
Because what Joseph started, they started a capitalist system with buying and selling. So I think that's where he started. He was a very good economist.
Okay.
And I believe that's where the capitalism came from.
Okay, so when you finish, you come back on. Anyway, what I think he was doing there, it was proper, and I think he was right what he was doing, because he had to manage the food, because the food in storage have to last for 7 years, and he just couldn't allow people just coming in and taking what they want and wasn't using the food responsible. And it tells us in verse 57, and all the countries came into Egypt to Joseph to buy corn, because that the famine was so severe in all the land. The famine was all over Egypt, all over Canaan, all of the surrounding areas. I believe a lot of these African countries that I just mentioned, like Libya, Arabia, Algeria, Niger, Mali, Chad, Sudan, Ethiopia, all of these places, I believe that the famine filtered into those areas, because as we said, just like today, if there's recession in the United States, you find that the recession is going to come across to Canada, it's going to go down to South America and down to the Caribbean area, all of these places. Yes, ma'am.
I'm thinking, Pastor, that those people that have to buy the food,
right?
Maybe those are the people that comes from the outskirts.
No, he was selling to everybody. He sell the food to everybody. The Egyptian have to buy.
What happened to that money now?
We will see.
It's my food, and you said about my food.
Yes.
What happened to that money?
He has to do that. We will see that later on, that when they run out of hard currency, they have us to exchange their animals, they have us to give them their lands. Maybe he took it too far. Maybe Joseph take it a little bit far, because you'll see that the people have us to give up their lands. Pharaoh, that is how all of the land in Egypt after Joseph's time, Pharaoh, he got the title deed for all of Egypt, because all of the lands that the people have, they have us to bring their title deed and surrender their title deed so that they can get food. So I don't know, I'm not going to say, it was something right that Joseph was doing in the sense that he take away their land. Maybe he took it too far.
But it was the people that requested Joseph.
Okay, what do you say about that?
It was the people who actually requested Joseph to
take their land.
To take their land.
Okay, well, we will come to that. We'll come to that in the next study. So here we see we are in we go to chapter 42 today. Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said to his sons, "Why do you look one upon another?" So here we see that Jacob, he came back in the picture. I thought he was dead. He's still alive. And, it seems as though he's alive and he's strong. And Jacob is taking responsibility here. And he is the leader of the family. Even though all of these guys, Jacob's sons, they were all big men. Remember the last time we studied about Judah? Judah had sons who married. Judah, he also married and had kids and all of that. These are big men. But here we see that Jacob still is in charge of the household. He is in charge of the family. He's in charge of that clan.
But Pastor, this one it says here, I don't understand that statement they make in the first time.
I don't understand the statement. You see, when Jacob saw that, when you say when they were hard.
Well, I don't think he actually mean that he saw with his eyes. He went to Egypt and saw that there was food in Egypt. I think people travel to Egypt and come back and they relate the story to Jacob. And Jacob, he have confirmation that there was food in Egypt. Because there was, they have roads that lead into these places. They have, today we call it highways. And they used to travel. Sometimes, maybe if you read in a different translation, it might say something else. But we know that it's not saying that Jacob went down to Egypt and he saw that there was food on him. I think it really means that it was told to him, or somebody who went to Egypt. Yes, he got confirmation. He got confirmation that there was food down in Egypt. Now it tells us now when Jacob saw that there was food, there was corn in Egypt. If you're a Bible student, you'll see that you'll study the Bible and you'll see that every time that there is a famine, anytime there's a famine and the people of God need food, where they go to? Egypt. They go to Egypt. Everybody run down to Egypt. When there is somebody needs security, somebody needs some kind of protection, where they run to? Egypt. All roads lead to Egypt. Egypt was the breadbasket of the world back in that time. And Egypt was the place that you'll go for security. And even Yeshua, when the Lord Jesus was born, and King was Herod. Herod the Great was after him to kill him. And the angel told Joseph and Mary to take the baby Jesus and go to where? No, Europe. Was it Europe? No, go down to Egypt and stay there for some period of time. And it seems as though the baby Jesus and his parents, they stay in Egypt for a period of time. And some people even believe that Yeshua, he received some of his early education in Egypt. So when there is a famine and when there's somebody needs security, they always run to Egypt. So that's the reason why I'm saying we can't believe everything that European theologians will say to us about Egypt. And Egypt represents bondage. Anybody ever hear that? Egypt represents bondage. This is what the church theology will tell us. That Egypt represents bondage. And if you're in Egypt, if you're in sin, it means that you need to come out of Egypt. And if you go back into sin, it means that you go into Egypt. I think that is a negative analogy that these European theologians are giving us about Egypt. Because when you study about Egypt, Egypt is mentioned more than 700 times in the Bible. And I believe the reason why they're giving us this negative explanation when it comes to Egypt is because Egypt is a black country. Ancient Egypt was a black country. And I don't worry with what they're showing us today on television and showing us that Egyptian, have this light skin complexion. Even Herodotus, he was they said that he was the father of history. And he explained, and I think it's about 450 years before the birth of Christ, he went to Egypt, and in his writings, he said that Egyptian and Ethiopians, they are all black people, they're all the same complexion, and we have to be careful that we don't allow some of the information that they give us today, we just take it. Because most of what is written in history, if you really do a study on it, you'll prove that a lot that was written in history is a lie. Because history is a group of men that come together and say, well, we're going to put this down as what happened, and we're going to agree on it, and this is what we're going to say happened. But it doesn't mean because it's recorded in a history book, this is actually what happened. And that's the reason why today we need to, especially any information that we get from European, we have to take it with a grain of salt, and a big one too. Because especially when we're dealing with anything to do with Africa, anything to do with the history of black people that we get from European historians, theologians, anybody in that field, we can't just take it and run with it. And that is what we was doing over the years. But I'm so glad that we have men from our community, we have good people from our community who check these things out and able to give us the truth. And that's the reason why we have to, we can't just say we read in the Bible and read the Bible alone. You know, reading the Bible is good, but you need to get other information, other books that can really help us and really help us see the truth. So it said that Jacob, he saw or he heard, it was relayed to him that there was corn in Egypt. Jacob said to his sons, Jacob is taking control. Why do you look one upon another? In other words, the sons stand around. You know, they don't know what to do. Playing with their hands. Big men, they don't know what to do. And you know, sometimes when situation not working out, when you know we have emergency in our lives, in our families, sometimes you know if you're not a balanced person and you're not a stable person, it can really push you off your feet. It can take you by surprise and you don't know exactly what to do. That is when you know if a man, if he is really a man and you really know what he's doing, is when you know you have an emergency in your family. You know, as we just say back in the islands, is when water become more than flour. That is the time. Yes, go ahead.
A quick one. Now that when you say that, when we were having this storm in Gilbert in Jamaica,
Yeah.
and our house at the time was, you know, very shaky, old house. And we said to our aunt, Mavis, come we listen to the news and we keep in touch. Come, the storm is coming, we got to get out. Let's go up the road and let's go into such and such a person's house. They said we can't come. She's a Christian, and she sit down there and trust me. It's like she just stay put. We have to literally lift her. The shock of it.
But yeah.
The shock of it. She didn't know what to do. And then we was just able to do it and the woman run up. By the time we run up.
Right. So Jacob was still in control. His sons, I guess they didn't know what to do. Even though they were big men, he had to, you know, store them up. You know, get busy, man. Get on your way. You need to go down to Egypt. Why do you look one upon another? Don't look at each other as if we're saying, what are we gonna do? We don't know what to do. Oh, you know, you have to take action. You have to have a backup plan. And he tells us, and he said, behold, I have heard, now he's saying it now, that there is corn in Egypt. Get ye down there and buy for us from there, that we may live and not die. So he said, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. And you need to get down there. Get busy, get organized, get your animals, if you have to take servants, get yourself organized so that you can go down to Egypt, because Jacob had a big family. It's not just his 12 sons and their wives and their children. They have servants, they have lots of people working for them. So they have to get food to feed the household. And the food is in Egypt. So they have to go down to Egypt to get this food. And it tells us they have to go quick so that Jacob and his family will not die, you know, of starvation. Now it tells us in verse 3, and Jacob, 10 sons went down to buy corn in Egypt. Now,
Joseph, 10 brothers.
Sorry, okay. Let me read that over. And Joseph, 10 brothers, yes, thank you, went down to buy corn in Egypt. Now, we want to use a little bit of common sense here as we look at this verse. You know, let us forget about, you know, all the college degree and the university degree and all of these different degrees that we have, and let us just use a little bit of common sense. Now, we found out before that European theologians tell us that Jacob and his household, they are European, meaning that they are white, okay? And one of them already down in Egypt. Joseph already taken into slavery down in Egypt. So here we see that Father Jacob is saying to his 10 sons, unfold your hands and get busy. You need to go down to Egypt to get food. And verse 3 is telling us that Joseph's 10 brothers went down to buy corn in Egypt. So here we see that because European already said, interpreters have already said that this whole family is European, and one already down in Egypt. So here we see 10 of them now, 10 European men, brothers. They're preparing now to go down to Egypt to get food. I want you to keep your eyes on that. They're going down to Egypt. Now, you have to take into consideration that the distance from Canaan to Egypt is more than 500 miles. It's more than 500 miles from Canaan to Egypt. And you have to remember too that the condition or the weather condition in Egypt is very hot. And we are from the Caribbean. Most of us here, I guess we are from the Caribbean. And we know what hot weather is all about. That was sometimes when I go in Grenada, I go in St. Vincent, the weather, the sun is so hot. If I'm going out, I gotta try to go out in the morning time and and get myself in a cool place, in a shade, because the sun, the heat is so much. And down in the Caribbean, we have the Caribbean Sea, we have the Atlantic Ocean, we have rivers, we have mountains, and we have breeze coming off from the sea and all of that, from the ocean. And you can feel cool breeze. Yeah. But in Egypt, you already have that. And here we see that the text is telling us here that these 10 brothers, supposed to be European, and they are going, 500 miles. They have to go these European guys going 500 miles from Canaan. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. They're going 500 miles from Canaan down to Egypt in all that heat. The sun is hot. Egypt, they have desert in Egypt. And that place is so hot. And we know how, sometimes you see these European people, a little bit of sun come out and the way how the skin start burning up and stuff like that. And we are seeing here what the text is saying. These 10 guys going for 500 miles, maybe 2 or 3 weeks before they get to Egypt. I know they're not going to walk all the way. They're going to use their donkey and use their mule, and if they have camels or whatever they might have, they will use these things. But the thing is, they have to be in the sun and in the heat for that long period of time. And I don't know if they were European, how they were going to survive. We see today, right now, even the people that is brought in from Europe, who they call the Jewish people. They brought them in from Europe, they're bringing them and put them to live in Israel. You know that Israel today have the second highest rate of melanoma cancer in the world. The fourth highest rate of melanoma cancer in the world is Australia. The people living in Australia came originally from Britain, and they go to Australia and take over Australia from the original people. And the people in Australia dying out like flies from melanoma cancer because the weather over there is so hot and their body can't handle it because they don't have melanin, they don't have enough melanin in their bodies to handle the weather over there, so they're dying out. And the people who live in Australia, the original people, the black people who living over there, melanoma cancer not doing them anything. And it's the same thing with the people who live in the Palestinian people who live in Israel or in Palestine. Melanoma cancer, not doing them. They're living over there for thousands of years. And these people that is brought in on a daily basis, they're dying to live over there. And this cancer killing them. So what I'm saying, if these people, they were really European, as the European interpreters of them are saying, just picture in your mind, they're going for 500 miles in that heat, in Egypt for that period of time. Think about, I don't know if they're going to make it.
I got a question there.
Yes, sir.
What is the reason why they wear long clothes in the hot country?
I guess it probably keep them cool.
Yeah.
I guess so. He probably keep him cool. That's the only reason I could say. But what I'm saying, if these people originate, if the people that they tell us today is God's chosen people really originate in that part of the world, and with that kind of heat and that kind of a weather that we have over there, and even now today, in our modern time, they can't handle that kind of a temperature that is over there. And we know for sure that the people who are living over there originally is people with melanin in their body. But listen, God, the Most High God is not a fool.
That's right.
He's not a fool. He designed people and he put them to live in certain areas. He designed them to live in certain areas. And that area of the world, the Most High God designed African people to live there, and it's African people who were living over there. But it was taken away from them. The identity of these people was stolen, their land was stolen, and given to other people. And it's just like we today. The Most High God created us. We were created to live in Africa. Anybody know that? Most High God created us to live in Africa. But the European came, stole, kidnapped. They stole us from Africa, and they take us back down, some go to the States, some go to South America, Brazil, Haiti, up in India, we have some of them, a lot of them up there. I was watching that they have one village alone in India, have more than 60,000 black people living up in India that was taken there during the time of the slave trade. People who living in India. They have, I think it's close to 1,000 villages in India with black people that came out from Africa. So we were designed by the Most High God to live in that climate. We stolen from Africa. Where will they take us? we were dropped off down in the Caribbean and stuff like that. Our bodies were created to live in that kind of climate. Now you're living here in North America. Our bodies wasn't really designed to live in this kind of climate. I know you guys love here and you love Canada. I want to be in Canada. But I'm telling you right now, the body that we have, if you continue living here, you may not live out your life expectancy. The amount of time that you're really supposed to live, if you stay back in the Caribbean or if you are living in an African country, living here, your time span is going to be cut short. You know why? Our body wasn't really designed to live in this kind of weather. Our body was designed by the Most High God to live, is either in Africa or down in the Caribbean area where we have that kind of a heat. The weather down there, our bodies were really designed to handle that kind of weather. So, getting back to what I'm talking about here, using a little bit of common sense, Joseph with his 10 brothers, they're going down to Egypt to get food. And as I said, these are European guys, and they're going for 500 miles. 500 miles in the heat, hot sun. They have to deal with all of that temperature, and they have to survive, and they have to make it down into Egypt. So we need to keep that in mind. It tells us, but Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob sent not with his brothers, for he said, lest perhaps mischief befell him. So here we see that Benjamin, who was the youngest son, after Joseph was sold into slavery, Benjamin became the favorite of Jacob. Jacob continued on that old page, having a favorite son. And he, placed Benjamin because he was the youngest one. I think he called him the son of my old age. He put him as the favorite son. And according to what the text is telling us here, after more than 20 years, Joseph had been sold down into Egypt. Jacob still don't trust his sons. He don't trust these guys. These guys, to their father, they are a bunch of crooks, and he don't trust them. And when he said here that he don't want to send Benjamin, because he thinks some evil might befell him, what he said, he don't really trust his sons to put Benjamin in their care, because Benjamin was not a 10-year-old boy. Benjamin was in, I don't know, he probably was close to maybe 25, 30, somewhere around there, because at this particular time that we're dealing with, Joseph is close to 40 or in his early 40s, because a lot of years have already passed. Joseph went down to Egypt when he was 17, and maybe more than 20 years already passed, because you remember he spent, when he came out from jail, it was 13 years he was in jail. And now we have the 7 years of plenty, and then we have 7 years of famine. So that's another 14 years. So when you add all of that together, Joseph is close to 40 years. So it means that, Benjamin is maybe 25, 30 years or so. And Jacob don't trust his older sons to put Benjamin in their care. Because, he already had Benjamin as his favorite. And I guess he probably thinking, I don't know what these guys might do to him. And I believe that Jacob, he really knew that something happened to Joseph that his sons was not saying to him. And so he didn't trust them. And it's a terrible thing when you have kids and you can't trust them. It's a terrible thing. And, especially when you're getting old. I was thinking about this morning. We just talk about, giving our kids our PIN number. After a while, I don't have to give one of my sons will have to have my PIN number. You know that? After a while, when if the Most High God spare my life, depending on how long I live, after a while, I won't be able to go to the bank to do transaction. What am I going to do? Am I going to keep all of my money under my mattress? What are you going to do? So, after a while, we will have to trust, we have to find one of our sons, one of our daughters, one of our granddaughter, your grandson, that you can really trust, that can really do your business, because when you get so old, you will not be able to go to the bank to do transaction. And you have to have somebody that you can depend on that will take care of your bills. If you decide to go back home, you have a house, you have to pay taxes, you have to pay utilities and stuff like that. You think you can run down, to the bank, you how much, 94, 96, whatever. You have to go to the bank, you're in your 80s. So we have to have children that we can trust. And now that we still have health and we are still strong, we have to start to, develop that kind of relationship with one of our sons, one of our daughters, somebody in the family that you can really depend on, that you can put this responsibility on. And it's not all children that is wasteful. Sometimes I talk about how the young generation, how they are, but I'm not saying that all young people are like that. They are young people that is responsible, and you can trust them. I personally, if I choose to give Anel my PIN number, he will not take out anything. I know for sure. But I don't know that for Kaz and Andre. I'm not saying they will take it. but I'm not sure. But I know for sure if I give my PIN number to Anel, I know he's not going to take out anything. At least I think so. But for sure, if I have to do that, I give that to Kaz and Andre. I don't know what they're going to do. So what I'm saying is that after a while, we have to have somebody that we can trust. Amen. Do you have anybody in your family you can trust? You ever think about that?
I do. All my kids have my PIN number, and I set it in my account, and nobody thinks about it.
Well, good for you, sister. Good for you. But not all children are like that. So Jacob was in that situation where he couldn't trust his sons. And because he couldn't trust his sons, he couldn't put Benjamin, who was his youngest son and the favorite in the family, he couldn't really put Benjamin into their care. So they had us to go down to Egypt. 10 of them journeyed down to Egypt. We will bring this to a close today. May the Lord bless us. Anybody have any question that you want to ask before we close it up for today? All right. Father, we thank you, we praise you, we bless your name. Continue to Be with us even as we continue in our time of worship. We ask these favors in the blessed anointed name of your Son, Yeshua. Amen. Bless the Lord.